At that point, I saw my son maybe an hour a day, and it was already killing me inside to see him so little. He was being raised by strangers predominantly. So during that annual review, I actually put in my notice at the firm. I just said, I don't think this is working out. And they were like, are you sure? And they gave me a few months to think about it. They're like, why don't you take a leave and think about it? And I did. I had times in my legal career, especially doing like really contentious litigation, that my body, it was a strong no. For example, I took a plaintiff's deposition once. She was a female surgeon and she had sued the hospital for gender discrimination. We represented the hospital. Reading the discovery and getting to know her story, I was like, I respect her. Like, I really respect her. And just the deposition, I had to kind of frame the termination as justified. And I didn't believe it was. So I almost threw up, and I wasn't nervous. I was prepared. I was fine. But it just went against my values so deeply. I told my husband, like, the desire I have to call this woman and say, I am so sorry for putting you through that. And he's like, you can't do that. I'm like, I know ethically, of course I can't do that. So there were times in my career where it was a really strong body reaction. I had this vision that I was standing on an island and I had one foot on the island and one foot stepping off of the island into nothing, into just open space. And then I heard this message: the island that you're stepping toward will not appear until you take this foot off this island. And to me, that foot off the island was, I had always lived with this safety net mentality because since losing my parents. So I'm 45 now, so this was a long time ago. But for most of my adult life, I had lived always needing a safety net. And I didn't want to let go of the firm because it was a good firm. It wasn't toxic for me. They allowed me to reduce my billable hours really low. So it was fine, but I just knew, like, my heart was in coaching, and I got this sense of this will not appear until you are willing to take your foot off, step off this island. So that's why I did that.
Hello, and welcome back to this episode of the Will Podcast. I am so excited to be here today with Jessie Brown. Jessie is a former lawyer turned coach, purpose guide, meditation teacher, and breathwork facilitator. She also facilitates sound baths, forest bathing, and retreats. And she's the mom of 2 boys and is married to a lawyer. And I'm also a 2-boy mom, so we can definitely bond over that. Mine are much older than yours, so it's quite an adventure being a parent, as is becoming a coach and an entrepreneur. So, Jessie, welcome to the Will Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a delight.
I've been after you for a long time to have a podcast, and I know you wanted to feel ready. So I'm so delighted because you share your gifts and what you're doing very generously on LinkedIn and social, and you've got a Substack and you're starting a podcast. Let's get into all the things. I'd love to hear your story about, first of all, becoming a lawyer.
Let's see, that goes back about 20 years. My first dream really was to be a writer, an English professor. I majored in English in college, and I started in an MFA program in creative nonfiction. So that was my first path. Both of my parents died when I was in college.
Oh, Jessie, I'm so sorry. That's a big loss.
Thank you so much. I didn't have a financial safety net or family safety net at all. And it really sent me in like survival mode for a long time. And I ended up really living by that practical part of me that just wanted to prioritize financial security above everything. So I ended up leaving the MFA program, taking the LSAT, going to law school. So my first job, I practiced. Well, that's how I went to law school.
That was a big motivator, right? I mean, like you said, that financial being able to create that financial safety net for yourself and you're on your own. So what was your early lawyer life like?
I started out at a big firm in DC, like an international firm. It was pretty intense. This was back before any remote work, before hybrid was a thing. So I was like eating all my meals at the office, either staying very late at the office, working long hours. I got married to another lawyer who was at that firm as well, and had my first son while I was at that firm. So went through like new mom life while practicing big law. It was an intense time.
How long were you there for?
About 3 years.
That's a lot of life to pack into 3 years too, getting married and having your first child and lawyering, going back to work. I remember reading an article when I was starting Will and I was researching, and I came across an article that a firm had been boasting that one of their perks for new moms was they would ship your breast milk for you. And I was like, is this an article from The Onion? You know, the spoof? I was like, is this a spoof? It was not. So where did you go from there? What happened for you after that big law experience?
The breast milk thing, I'm like, oh, I have stories about pregnancy and pumping while I was at that firm, but we could talk for probably days. So what happened there was I came back after maternity leave, and long story short, our son had some medical needs. So we were like schlepping from DC to New York every 3 weeks to see a specialist for his first year. And the demands of 2 parents in a big firm we didn't really have family help. And then our son and his needs, it was just a lot on us as a family and individually. In my annual review that year, one of the partners actually said I needed to hire a second nanny, that I needed a night nanny or like round the clock care, because I was working with clients on the West Coast and I needed to be more available in the evenings and weekends. And I had been so available before maternity leave. So they reflected to me, you know, you seem like you've changed since you came back from maternity. You think? Maybe just a little bit.
I have a child with some special medical needs. Like maybe I've just oh, I'm sorry. It's not funny. And it's hilarious.
Yes. So literally, and at that point, I saw my son maybe an hour a day, and it was already killing me inside to see him so little. He was being raised by strangers predominantly. So during that annual review, I actually put in my notice at the firm. I just said, I don't think this is working out. And they were like, are you sure? And they gave me a few months to think about it. They're like, why don't you take a leave and think about it? And I did. During that time, it was sort of after the financial crisis. This was in 2011. So 2009 to 2011 had been really hard in the economy. And during that time, I started exploring other job options. But all of my success was with other big law firms. So I wanted to go work at the DOJ or maybe a nonprofit, like something that I thought might have more balance. But those were just not available to me at the time. It was just more of the same, more of the same. So I was kind of desperate and was like, this isn't working. I'm just going to stay home for a little bit with my son and kind of figure things out. So that was what I did next.
That's a lot to give up, though, after working so hard in law school and having that initial success. What really helped you make that decision and make that decision okay for you?
This was one of the first times I feel like I really listened to my body. I had this primal urge to be with my son, not 24 hours a day. I love being with other adults. I had other activities, but like the limited time I had with him was like killing me inside. And I had this urge, and I remember feeling like, I don't care if I have to move to a studio apartment an hour outside of the city and live on the most basic rice and beans to be with my child. Like that was how it felt at that time. So it really, truly felt almost like not a choice. Like my whole being, my body just longed to be with him more than I was able to.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's like, I'm sure it's something, given the kind of work that you do, the meditation and the breath work, and there's so much emphasis now on somatics and body awareness. That information was so potent for you and you were able to follow it so clearly. Take us through the next phases of your life and career and how you found your way into coaching.
So I was home for a little bit. I had planned to go back to work. I had never planned to stay home with my kids long term, and just sort of thought, let me just have my children and then go back to work. At the same time, my husband wanted to go in-house. So we were balancing competing things at the time, and there weren't a lot of options on the East Coast. So he was interviewing all over the country, and it looked like we would be moving. So I just sort of put a pin in my career stuff, not wanting to start a new job and then have to leave. Again, remote work wasn't that common at the time. So we moved to Arizona for him to go in-house with a company 11 years ago. And he's still at that company. He loves it. So when we moved to Arizona, I had a 3-year-old and a newborn at the time. And I didn't really have a network here, community here. So it was a challenging move. I had a really good network in DC and a really good, lot of lawyer friends, a lot of mom friends, a lot of support. So this was not an easy move, but it was the right move, I think, for our family and for him. My first few years here, I kind of just took care of my kids, tried to build some community. It was a little challenging. And then I wasn't licensed here, so I couldn't wave in. And I didn't have family here to help. It was just us. So when my youngest son was 2 or 3, I took the bar exam here. So I took a second bar exam and I started studying 2017 and put my kids in childcare and really felt pressure to pass it because this time I was paying for the prep course myself, the bar exam myself, the childcare. So I studied a lot and I went back to practicing law here 8 years ago.
And what kind of practice were you doing that and what kind of environment were you in?
Okay, so first, I had only had one experience and it was just working in this large firm in DC. So I was sort of felt like allergic to big firms at first. I thought I'm not going to consider any other large firms. So I worked at a firm that maybe has 40 lawyers. I think at the time they had 25 or something, a sort of middle firm. And I did a mix of like employment and commercial litigation, some insurance defense, like a mix of litigation. It was okay. There were maybe 2 women at the firm. It was a very much predominantly white male firm, kind of a sleepy, quiet firm. It was fine for a year. And then a partner at another little bit of a larger firm reached out, invited me for drinks, and it was like an informal interview. So I ended up transitioning to another firm, a little bit of a pay bump and a little bit more interesting work and a little bit of the ability to develop some of my own business there. So I was at that firm for a little over a year. And then my firm where I stayed for about 4.5 years, a recruiter contacted me. That was this firm, Hush Blackwell, where I was for a while. And it was not as big as my first firm. It wasn't an international firm. It's just a U.S. firm. At first I said, forget it. I'm not going back to a big firm. But that she assured me it's not that kind of firm. It's a good work-life balance, blah, blah, blah. There's like happy working parents here. So I spoke with quite a few attorneys at the firm before agreeing to come there. And I did accept the job there. And it was a little bit of a pay increase. I was able to do more interesting work at that firm.
All right. So you went from big law to some mommy raising those little ones time, back into small, medium, back to big law. And then what? Because better work-life balance is relative.
Yes, it really is. It totally is.
So let's hear what was going on for you.
I did find that the last firm I was at, I thought of it as a kind of a choose your own adventure firm. Like they did allow me to try different practice areas. And when I started, I was still doing like class action defense litigation. That's what I was hired to do, and some employment litigation. But through the firm, there were a couple of things that happened. One, they had this sort of partnership leadership training program for people who were on that track. And we went for a weekend to Austin and kind of like organizational consultants, coaches were there, did Clifton Strengths and all that. Through that experience, even the consultant, they put our Clifton Strengths results on some big screen and went over our stuff. And my results, like she said to me privately, she goes, your results are so different from all the other lawyers. And I was like, yeah, I'm not that surprised. But it was a little bit of a light bulb moment for me because she did another exercise, I remember, where she had us write a sentence with our dominant hand 3 times and with our non-dominant hand 3 times. And she said, see how easy it is to write with your dominant hand? It's like natural, it flows. See how challenging, how much energy and focus it takes to write with your non-dominant hand? That's what it's like when you're operating outside your strengths. Like you can do it, but the results aren't great and it takes a lot of energy. And that was a light bulb moment for me because as a lawyer, I always felt like this round peg in a square hole, like so much energy. I would have to like pep talk myself to sit at my desk to do the work. I love interacting with people one-on-one in like a deep interpersonal way. And I mostly was just on my computer researching and writing. I didn't have a lot of human interaction as a lawyer. Like it was fairly transactional. The interactions were transactional. So that was the first little clue that I was like, oh, okay.
So just a little aside, I do Clifton Strengths with all the women who come into Will. It's one of the very first things that we do. And I definitely see themes, right? And so I just wrote down 5 strengths. I suspect you have more strengths in the relationship domain than in the executing. Can I guess your top 5 strengths and see how I do?
So I may have to look up the sheet because this was a while ago, but I'll see if I
Okay, well, we can play that later. My hunch is you have communication and empathy and maybe harmony and developer.
Mm-hmm. I think maximizer is one.
I wrote maximizer. Yeah. I wrote it.
Yes. Oh, amazing. You're good. You're good.
I've been doing it for a long time with people. So that's hilarious. And I see that, especially the people who really don't like litigation and who really, they want to be talking with other people, not spending all day looking at documents or arguing with opposing counsel.
That's exactly right. That's why after that, I actually asked the leadership at my firm, could I try estate planning? So a complete shift. And I had to essentially interview again with the partners, with the head of the private wealth group. I had to kind of go through an interview process internally to transition. And I did that for about a year. And at first I did like the lawyers in the practice group, and it's not contentious. So I appreciated that. I'll just share this tiny little tidbit. So a year later, I went 4 days in a row without talking to a single colleague or client. It was just drafting trust, revising wills and trust documents. And it was basically, we received client information, we put it in software, and then we would revise and edit the document. So it was really, again, like lacking that human element that I needed and that I felt were my strengths. I sort of felt very replaceable as an estate. I was like, I think a lot of other people could do this. This doesn't feel like my unique contribution. I went back to my firm and I was friends with the partner at the firm who represented hospices. That was her whole book, is hospices. And I was a hospice volunteer at the time. I was volunteering actually with a firm client here in Phoenix. I would visit the hospice patients like weekly. So she and I had become friends because she was also a hospice volunteer. And I had spoken on her podcast about employment law issues affecting hospices during COVID. So I knew her and I reached out and she said, hey, why don't you try working on my team? Like maybe you'll like it. And she knew that I was considering leaving, like transitioning, either coaching or therapy, what I was thinking. So becoming a therapist or a coach. I was on her team for a year. She's wonderful. Actually, they're great lawyers. I liked the clients. But again, it was like 90% documents, drafting, and just like, I love talking to an expert witness or something like that, but it was really like 10% of the time.
So what was your body telling you at this point in time in your journey?
You know, what's interesting is like, I had times in my legal career, especially doing like really contentious litigation, that my body, it was a strong no. For example, I took a plaintiff's deposition once. She was a female surgeon and she had sued the hospital for gender discrimination. We represented the hospital. Reading the discovery and getting to know her story, I was like, I respect her. Like, I really respect her. And just the deposition, I had to kind of frame the termination as justified, and I didn't believe it was. So I almost threw up, and I wasn't nervous. I was prepared. I was fine. But it just went against my values so deeply. I told my husband, like, the desire I have to call this woman and say, I am so sorry for putting you through that. And he's like, you can't do that. I'm like, I know ethically, of course I can't do that. So there were times in my career where it was a really strong body reaction. Toward the end, estate planning and hospice work, it wasn't that type of visceral reaction. It was more that I was bored, not stimulated, and I would have to pep talk myself, like, just do the work, just focus, just sit down and just work on the documents. Or I would try to focus on what the hospices did. Like, they provide good services. They help people at the end of life. Like, I tried to convince myself.
Look at the bigger picture, the bigger mission of what you were working on. But still, it was back to that, like, you're still writing with your non-dominant hand and trying to, like, force it, still trying to force that. And so what was the final kind of, often I find with women lawyers, there's a final straw moment, or there's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And like, there's just that last cut and you're like, I'm done. And so were you starting to research coaching and therapy?
After the aha moment with the Clifton Strengths experience, I hired my own coach. So I worked with her for a year. It was a phenomenal experience. And I had also, after working with her for a year, enrolled in a coach training program. So that was a year-long program, and my firm allowed me to reduce my billable hours, go part-time, because the coach training was a lot. My school was probably 20 hours a week for a year. So I reduced my billable hours, was doing the coach training, and also did other trainings I was interested in. So the shift I made, it was like two lives. I was doing my legal work, and then I was on this path of saying yes to my curiosity, not knowing where it would lead. So, for example, I heard Alua Arthur, who's a lawyer turned death doula. I heard her speak on NPR and I like wept. I was like, this is what I thought estate planning would be like, this deep, meaningful work. So I ended up doing about a 6-month or so death doula training with her, which was part of volunteering with hospice patients. And I thought I might go that path, But being with those individuals at the end of life, I felt this strong call to help people while they still have a time to make different choices.
Wow, beautiful. On the podcast, I had Marnie Blank. I don't know if you've met Marnie, who she's for a lawyer turned death doula also, but she also like really helps families and patients like prepare for death. So you really just followed your curiosity. It's funny, I've got my new bracelet for the year says curiosity. So yeah, so it's definitely it's one of my words of the year also. And you were raising young children also, like, let's not forget, you were also like a wife and a mother and have these young children and are still kind of building community in Arizona.
So to go back to your question about what was the final thing that led me to leave law. So yes, I was managing all this stuff. So I was busy. My weekends were like coach training and reading and all that stuff and soccer games and whatever. I had to say no to things that weren't a lot of things, but I was also on a board of directors for 4 years and volunteering in the community. I was quite busy. What happened was I started coaching lawyers at my firm. So I didn't even intend to. My first client approached me at a firm retreat and she's like, oh, I want to work with you as a coach. And I was like, I'm not ready. I'm still in my coach training. And fast forward a few months later, she and I got connected and she became my first paying client. And I had done some like pro bono coaching just to get my hours and experience with lawyers at my firm. So then I started having a few clients and was sort of managing all these different domains of life. And the more the coaching grew, the more like that was my heart, that was my passion. And then it was actually at a law firm conference that I spoke at with a partner in Texas. She said to me, okay, Jessie, when are you going to quit? Like, it is so clear your heart is in coaching. That is so obvious. Like, when are you just going to leave? And I was like, well, let me build some more financial cushion and da-da-da-da-da. And then what actually happened, because I know you're open to this stuff, so I'll just share. I don't usually share this stuff. Like, I haven't written about it.
Bring on the woo.
It's the woo. This was a couple years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, because I left my firm December. It was like a year and 2 months ago, but I gave like 6 months notice. So it was a slow departure. But what happened was I had this vision that I was standing on an island and I had 1 foot on the island and 1 foot stepping off of the island into nothing, into just open space. And then I heard this message: the island that you're stepping toward will not appear until you take this foot off this island.
Full body chills. Yes.
And to me, that foot off the island was, I had always lived with this safety net mentality since losing my parents. So I'm 45 now, so this was a long time ago. But for most of my adult life, I had lived always needing a safety net. And I didn't want to let go of the firm because it was a good firm. It wasn't toxic for me. They allowed me to reduce my billable hours really low. So it was fine, but I just knew like my heart was in coaching. And I got this sense of this will not appear until you are willing to take your foot off, step off this island. So that's why I did that.
Thank you for sharing that story with us. Yeah. I mean, I absolutely, when I get chills like that, it's like there's some truth has been spoken or there's some divine wisdom usually for someone to follow. So really appreciate that. Yeah, that's beautiful. And then what happened when you took the foot off the island?
I truly believe that was, I guess, a year and a half ago or so. It has just gotten better and better. Like, to be honest, it's like the work, I know you probably experienced this too. I have had so many times of like crying tears of gratitude because of like the beauty of connecting with people in this way. I just find it so deeply rewarding and so fulfilling. So I've met more and more aligned clients. My first fear was when I would leave my firm that I wouldn't ever find any more clients because all of my clients were at that law firm and they all came to me through that law firm regularly. Like anytime I could speak on a panel there and I would give a plug for coaching, I would get a new client. And then I was like, I'm cutting this off. I'm like leaving this place. So I was nervous. So I started sharing stuff on LinkedIn and then strangers started reaching out. I was like, oh, okay. And then little by little, people have reached out or sometimes they refer new people to me. So it's grown over time. And the work, I feel like I have gotten more clear on what it is I really want to do and what I think my gifts are and the types of individuals I'm best suited to serve.
It's so great. And I probably became aware of you like pretty shortly after you started putting yourself out on LinkedIn. Like I noticed you right away. There's something very, very shiny about you and very, very bright. I mean that fully in the open space, and your coaching. Tell us about the difference between being a purpose guide and a coach, what that means to you. And wait, before I do, just like congratulations on making that change. I think your story illustrates the reality of the kind of transition, right? You have these light bulb moments, the retreat, the strengths finder, the handwriting. You tried this, you lateraled here. You made 4 lateral moves. You lateraled within your firm. I see so often women lawyers, they try everything, no stone unturned, right? Until they finally give themselves permission to do the thing that they want to do. I just like anything you have to say about that, because I think the cultural trapping, the identity, the safety net is so strong. And it's like they're heavy weights on ankles, you know? So anything you would like to say to speak to that, to like what helped you and what you're observing can help people in that kind of transition?
Yes. I mean, what comes to mind is what's on your bracelet. It's getting curious about that desire to always have a safety net. I mean, these are parts of us that develop to keep us safe when we're younger, that usually limit us when we're older. So getting curious about those parts, getting to know those parts of us that say, it's not safe to follow my heart. I have to stay in this thing, or I can't disappoint my parents. I mean, I talk to people in their 50s who tell me they don't want to make a job change because they'll disappoint a parent. So just getting curious with compassion, let's get to know that part of you that believes that and see what we might discover. There's usually fear under there. Let's get curious with compassion about that fear. Is that still relevant? A lot of times these are fears that were very relevant when we were 14, 8 years old, 22, not anymore. So that would be my first invitation.
That's beautiful. The other thing is like everyone is on their own trajectory, right? And it's not making a career change and leaving big law or the practice or in-house or wherever you are is not an instant thing. Once you decide to start to explore and get curious, it doesn't mean you're leaving the next day. Usually it means you're on that path. All right. Thank you. So tell us about the difference between being a coach and a purpose guide.
So the Purpose Guide program is not something I created. It's with an organization called the Purpose Guides Institute. And a friend of mine who I went through coach training with, he told me about it. So I don't know if I had not heard of Bill Plotkin, but it's based on the work of Bill Plotkin. And basically my friend told me about it about a year ago. And I looked into their website and I was like, oh, this is so cool. I love this stuff. So it's a 6-month program and they have created the content. So it's not a program I have created. And it's a combination of depth psychology, so a lot of Carl Jung's work, shadow work, parts work, which I'm trained a lot in internal family systems, so I love parts work. So those are aspects, but we also do what we call a soul quest, which is modeled after the vision quest. So it's out in nature, fasting, seeking a vision. That's in month 5 of the program. So we build up to going on a soul quest, and it's pretty deep work. I mean, every week is roughly 5-hour commitment of time for people to do it, because it's very based in, like, I have an altar next to me that I created as part of the program. So one of the practices is like creating a purpose altar, what we call a purpose altar. It's a lot of rituals, practices, meditation, visualization, active imagination, mythology, archetypes, that type of exploration. Everything that's like non-left brain, the creative and intuition and accessing all of that, other ways of knowing. So that's a program that I guide people through over 6 months, and then they go on their soul quest, which is like so exciting. And it's a little deeper. I would say the career work, career coaching is really specific to career. So we're looking at strengths, we're looking at values, we're looking at a lot of career related assessments and fine tuning really what they want for their career. This, what we call the Purpose Guide, the Purpose Program, is what we call your soul level purpose. So it's like your essence, the deepest part of you. It does usually impact your career, but it's not specifically related to career.
Got it. Do you go with them on that soul quest, or do they go on their own? but they go out in nature and that's like planned and they do something solo. Is that what that is?
Exactly. So, and I went through the program as a participant. So part of the requirement for this to become a guide with this organization is you go through it first with your own guide. So I did that previously last fall. There's a lot of safety, like we always know where they're going on their soul quest. We need a person to contact. They let us know when they go out, when they come back. And it's really one day. It's not overnight. We try to make sure that they're really safe and everything. But it is a solo one day spent out in nature by themselves.
And they're choosing to do that. I mean, it's a voluntary. They could not do that too. Are you combining? Are you seeing because it's interesting in my work, I'm not a trade purpose guide. I definitely think in my work with women lawyers, we're doing some deeper soul level work and purpose work and mindset and somatic and sort of people come in because they're so unhappy, right? They don't know what else they could do. They want to figure that out. That's sort of really like the gateway for many of the women I work with. Ends up being a little bit of a soul inquiry. So are you combining that work as well?
With my career coaching with lawyers, about half of the clients that I work with are open to this. So those clients, we do explore other things. I mean, I've done a lot of guided visualizations with clients or meditations or give them little practices they can do in between sessions, or maybe there's a book or a podcast or something that they might enjoy. But then I have clients who are not interested in any of that. It is more cognitive. We're looking at a strengths assessment. We're looking at the values, what matches up. There is a little bit of the deeper inquiry, especially somatic, like what comes up in your body when you consider this or that decision. So the purpose guide work, even to work with me in that capacity, there's an interview process. They have to read a chapter in a book, watch a video, and then they go on a soul walk to check in with their own soul. Should I do this program? And it's quite a big time commitment. And it's also considered intentionally ego destabilizing. We have modules where we're looking at all of our habits, including the media we consume, our new food, our relationships, our habits, and it's really trying to get to that most soul-aligned life possible. So it tends to be people a little bit more midlife, perhaps older, or tend to be more interested in that kind of program.
Beautiful. Jessie, and you're also doing meditation and breath work, and I see your gong and your chimes. You shared it on LinkedIn, like a drum that sounds like the ocean. I was like, I want one of those. Oh my God. So good. So tell us a little bit about the other kind of beautiful things, ways you're serving people.
Thank you so much. So I have found for me, a lot of my path, what I would say to returning to my own soul, has been a lot of through the senses, actually. So like sensory type experiences. So forest bathing, sound healing, these are all sensory type experiences of mindfulness, but really in nature or with sound. These and breath work, these are all things I discovered when I was still practicing law. And they were so supportive to me. My coach's retreats, she would have someone come and do breath work. The first few times I did it, it was all kinds of stuff coming up.
Breath work is hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a lot of emotional release and clearing a lot of stuff. So I do both of these in person and online. Sound healing is just in person. So I do that monthly at my house, or I rent a studio or my house, depending on the size of the group. And I do have some lawyers who come, which is really cool to offer it to them. And then I do breath work in person and over Zoom as well. And it's an organization called Elemental Rhythm. And without getting into all of it, it includes music, a little bit of movement, and meditation at the end. So my passion is helping people connect with their true nature, their soul. So I think these are like many different doorways.
Yeah, so good. Lots of ways to work with you virtually or in person if you're in the Phoenix area, right? I'm leading a retreat. I know one of the things you do is I'm leading a retreat to Costa Rica with a group of women lawyers. We're going to have a sound bath and some breath work and cacao ceremony. So I think maybe as we start to wrap up, you talked about the purpose guide work a little bit more, but who is that ideal client who you could bring all your gifts and all the menu of beautiful ways you support people?
So, a few people come to mind who I do feel are current clients and some are former clients. And I'd say that they are people who are really open to I mean, I'm somebody who talks about the soul or spirituality. Those are going to be my most aligned clients, people who are open to whether it's meditation or visualization or intuition, connecting in that way. And my best people are also readers. I'm a huge reader.
I bet you have learner in your top 10 also.
I think it's top 2. I think it's like my second.
You definitely have learner. That was the other one. I was like, yeah, she's got learner also.
My clients who, if I'm like, I love being able to recommend a book that's like just where somebody's at and could take them like a little deeper. So I would say people who enjoy learning, people who are ready to carve out some space in their life for the deep inner work, and people who are ready to go a little bit deeper. Not everybody is there, but I would say those are going to be my ideal clients. And people who are looking for that like most authentic, most aligned, most true to them, life and career, like that's what they're seeking. Those are going to be my ideal people.
Beautiful. You and I are very aligned in that. And those are my people too. And I think there are so many lawyers out there, women, men, non-binary, who are desperate, who are in so much pain, are waking up at 3 a.m. wondering, what the hell am I doing with my life? And you're a beautiful resource that's out here to help. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Probably half of the people I work with, just to mention, don't want to leave the law. So that is the unique. So I am a little bit agnostic about that, like whether someone stays or not. It's more like what is truly aligned with your soul and just figuring that out. So I have one client, a former client, I just met with her for a breathwork session, and she went from a firm to in-house. But even then, when we met, she thought she wanted to be a partner at her firm and didn't know and all these things. But she identified wanting to go in-house, and now she's just like thriving. She looks like a different human being. And she said that. She's like, I can't believe how different this experience is. Like, she's just doing so well.
That's great. Yeah, even though my business is called Women Interested in Leaving Big Law or Law, the key word is interested. And it really is about exploring what is that soul alignment, what's the right fit. Part of what I do is help people figure out what are the elements of what they want present in their life, and their strengths and their skills and their interests and their values are all part of that. And then what are opportunities that can match up with that get you excited? And then they move into research and then making a transition. I would say over half of the women I work with also do not leave the practice. They leave their current thing, or they take a leave of absence and then they go back and they're in a different way. And so it's not always about leaving. It's about figuring out what's the right fit for you, whether that's another legal role, starting your own legal business. It's always fun to help people find what's that right aligned thing for them. That's the game for me too.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I see both of us passionate about helping people be led from within rather than looking outside and what should I do and all that stuff. And from the wisest part of themselves, not the fear. And
1,000%. I often say to people, like, the first 3 months of my program with them, it's very much internal. I'm like, the answer is inside. The answer is within. We have to go in before you can go out.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Well, Jessie, how can people find you?
Yeah, so I am active on LinkedIn. I do have a Substack called Returning to Soul. I have launched a podcast called Returning to Soul as well. So that's on Apple and Spotify. So yeah, those are all good ways to connect. And I have a website with the same name, Returning to Soul.
Beautiful. All right. Well, Jessie, thank you for returning to your soul so you can guide other people to theirs. All right. We'll put some of these things in the show notes. And thank you for being here, being part of the Will Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Will Podcast. If you liked what you heard, please follow for more, rate and review to help another unhappy lawyer find her way here and see there's nothing wrong with her. You can also please share it with a friend. To learn more about how Will can guide you to clarity, freedom, and relief, go to www.womeninterestedinleavinglaw.com and book your confidential consultation. Where there's a will, there's a way. Let's get you on your way today.